Senator Rousakos.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable colleagues, I rise to speak to Bill C19 and add my voice of concern of what's been going on with our country and in this Parliament over the last few weeks and months. And it's a pattern that has developed not only due to the last few months and the crisis we're facing, but it's a pattern that has developed before that, even before COVID. I know COVID is the justification of why we've added $250 billion to our debt in just a few weeks. But the truth of the matter is the fiscal irresponsibility of the current state of affairs has been evident and pronounced since 2015. Senator Harder points out that whatever plan, he says, the government would put forward, he's certain that Senator Plett would be opposed to. But I'm equally certain, even in an absence of a plan, Senator Harder will get up and compliment and start the wave of what a great job this government is doing. So I don't think that necessarily is an answer in terms of the troubling concerns that I have currently right now. No doubt we've gone through a pandemic, and we're still going through that pandemic, and there's, without a doubt, we're learning every day if we could have managed it better or what we did well and what we didn't do so well. And I guess in due time we're going to get the final report card that will come in. But one thing is certain. If the pandemic doesn't kill us, there's no doubt, if you look at the state of economic affairs right now, they certainly will over the next few years. And I think the government has to show the same degree of urgency in dealing with the fiscal state of affairs as the country, as they've shown over the last few weeks in dealing with COVID. We, colleagues in this place, have a fundamental responsibility to be the voice of people of this country. And this is the chamber of Parliament, and this is the chamber that represents our citizens. And we're also the custodians of the taxpayers' rights and privileges that they have. We have to be the ones that are the last line of defense in questioning the government and calling them out whenever we think they need to be called out and holding them to account. And I ask each and every one of you, if you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, we just spent $250 billion over the last few weeks, and in the course of the next few weeks, we've added $250 billion to the debt of the country, a country that's 153 years old. Ask yourself when you look in the mirror, did we do the scrutiny that needed to be done on behalf of taxpayers? Or were we cajoled, as so often is the case in Parliament, by a government using the urgency of circumstance to say, don't worry, we got to get it out the door, we need to do this in a hurry or else. And of course, it's a strong argument. Sort of, they put our backs to the wall. Who's going to dare stand up and say, well, wait a second. You know, we don't want to get it out the door in a half an hour. We might want to get it out the door in 3 hours, or in 3 days, or in 4 days. Because let's call a spade a spade. There's certain programs that went out the door in a hurry back in March and April. There's other programs that they promised and they've committed to, and I say they, the government, and we're still waiting for them. At the end of the day, politicians, colleagues, always make choices based on politics. Governments always make choices based on politics. And it's incumbent on parliaments to make choices on the interest of Canadians. Now, Senator Harder said earlier in his compelling speech about how in the House of Commons all parties are consulted and all negotiations are done in a matter-of-fact, that's business-usual basis, and nothing is done in a vacuum. And of course, there's ample opportunity on that side for them to scrutinize the bills. Well, the opposition on that side doesn't necessarily feel they had adequate time to scrutinize things, but that's neither here nor there. I'll speak for this place. Have we had adequate time? Are 1 or 2 committee meetings adequate time to put forward a supply bill of $18 billion or $53 billion? Clearly not. We have been cajoled to get things out the door on an urgency basis, and the truth of the matter is we haven't been the custodians on behalf of taxpayers that they pay us quite handsomely to come here and be. And I'm concerned because the truth of the matter is I've came here in 2009, and I see year after year, and it's not exclusive to one political party or another, the eradication of the influence and the responsibility of Parliament, because the truth of the matter is, the upper chamber, the other place, politicians who get elected on the executive branch of government consider us to be an impediment. We all know at the end of the day, they have their plans, they feel that they have an obligation to the electorate, and they got to respond now. But we also have an obligation. When we came here and we got sworn in, when we got summoned to this place, is to be the custodian of the taxpayers and the citizens of this country, and to ask ourselves where every dollar is going. They take the final decision, but we have to ask the hard questions. And the truth of the matter is, in 2015, when this government was elected, they received a balanced budget. And they'll argue that it was $2 billion over, $2 billion less. For all intents and purposes, if we look at the financial balance sheet of 2015, it looked pretty good. By today's standards, it looked pretty good even by pre-COVID standards in 2019. We have the current Prime Minister who got elected in 2015, touting, I remember, in debate after debate, how Canada is the best situated country in the world in terms of debt to GDP ratio. He was right. We were the best situated debt to GDP ratio country in the world in 2015. No doubt. And the reason we were is there were successive efforts, not just by the former Harper government, by the Chrétien government before that, 2 decades of successive efforts to balance the books. And of course, the previous government also inherited a crisis. Crises aren't new. They come and they go all the time. And governments in those good periods of economic times prepare themselves for the bust that invariably comes at one point or another. And the truth of the matter is, again, Senator Harder says that this government, it's not one plan. They must have a bunch of plans. Well, the truth of the matter is, when it comes to planning and when it comes to numbers, they're not as good as they are on rhetoric. They are excellent at navel gazing. They're excellent at rhetoric. I had the minister earlier in the Committee of the Whole say here how, thank God for their Senate reform, because if it wasn't for Senate reform, the ministers wouldn't be before us today. Come on, colleagues. We all know how Parliament works. There was no Senate reform. The Senate of the Whole always had the power to invite a minister of the Crown to the Senate of the Whole, and they always have done so in the past when required. That's a right and obligation we have as parliamentarians. There was no change done by any government, this one or any one before. But where they do have the ability, I think, to be accountable is on numbers. They got elected in 2015 saying that they will increase the budget. That's the commitment they made to the public when they got elected. And the deficit will not be any higher than $10 billion. It will be manageable. And they made a commitment that it will be balanced by 2019. Well, 2019 rolled around, and the truth of the matter is that balanced budget never came. The controlled deficit of $10 billion, moderate, reasonable, became $30 billion, which was $30 billion less you were able to use in this particular COVID crisis. We had a situation where they didn't take care of the financial fiscal situation of the House. Our foreign investment went from, I think, a record $41 or $42 or $43 billion in 2014, 2015, down now by 50%. Our dollar took a pummeling from where it was between 2008 to 2015. Our natural resources sector got pummeled and beaten to death. And the truth of the matter is that was a cash cow during good times in order to give us the opportunity to deal with crises as we did in 2008 and 2009. And now we have a situation where the parliamentary budget officer on the other side is trying to make heads or tails of what the fiscal state of the country is. And he's sort of projecting a $280 billion deficit for this year. And the government's saying, no, we sort of see $240 billion. They're not off by a few $1 billion, colleagues. They're off by $20 billion. And you know why they're off by $20 billion? And they might even be off by $30 billion? Is because we have currently a government that has no fiscal responsibility as a reflex. They have no plan. And colleagues, when's the last time we saw a budget from this government? The Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance admitted over and over, said for weeks, they can't even provide a financial statement because they don't know what the figures are. They can't really calculate what the numbers are. Can you imagine the CEO of your former bank, Senator Lafreda, saying, I can't give you a financial statement or a budget for this year because I can't tell you what the numbers are going to be? How far would that go with the shareholders? So if the shareholders of the Royal Bank wouldn't tolerate that, if the shareholders of any medium or large-sized corporation wouldn't tolerate that, why would the taxpayers of this country tolerate it? And why would we in the upper chamber allow this to be tolerable? Why do we tolerate this? I will allow all of you to contemplate that, think about that for a while, and when we look at ourselves in the mirror when we go home, when we rise in a few days, ask ourselves those questions. I think we all know what the answers are. And it's just not acceptable. We just recently, of course, found out that our country got downgraded in terms of our credit rating from AAA to AA. And again, it took 2 decades of work to get that AAA rating done. It's not an easy thing. And colleagues, it's not enough to say, well, it's because of COVID. No, it's not just because of COVID. It's because we didn't have the fiscal plan in place during the good times, while our economy was going relatively well, to be in a position to deal with the storm that we're dealing with right now. And colleagues, Australia, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, Norway, Singapore, these are countries with a AAA rating at this particular point, credit rating. And they've gone through COVID. It's not unique to Canada. They've gone through it. They've managed it, some better, some worse. That's a whole other debate for another time. But a country like Canada, with the economic capacity that we have, with the world's largest middle-class market to the south of us, with the strength and human resources that we have in this country, to be in a situation where we're slipping our debt to GDP ratio, trust me, in a few months will be a catastrophe, from the best in the world to a catastrophe. And we have colleagues that are saying, what's the rush to have, why are we criticizing the government and why are we hard on ministers? Colleagues, ministers parading through the Senate of the whole here for an hour or 2 hours and a half to spew their political lines while we get 5 minutes to ask critical questions isn't sufficient. Not about racism, certainly not about the fiscal state of affairs. When we're passing a bill that is going to be expending $53 billion in a very short period of time, and we do that over 1 or 2 meetings of the Finance Committee, and we're doing second and third reading debates here like it's Formula One. Let me tell you, I just replaced the air conditioning system in my house. I replaced the compressor. Trust me, I was more diligent in doing that than we are here today, spending billions of dollars. So why are we treating the fiscal pocket of our taxpayers and the people we represent with such neglect when we take care of our own personal finances with such diligence and interest? So, colleagues, I understand how this place has evolved through the years, and I understand how Parliament is starting to erode, and it has eroded. I've seen it since 2009 when I came here, and we had a Prime Minister back then who was very, very belligerent towards this institution. I'm a conservative, I admit it. I've had arguments with him many times. At the end of the day, I've seen it time and time again from Prime Minister after Prime Minister. When they're in opposition, they have all the time for the House of Commons, all the time in the world for the Senate, and they think we have to do our due diligence and ask the tough questions. And as soon as they become Prime Ministers, they want to get their agenda through. They want to do what's politically expedient. They're in a hurry for the next election. I'm not. You're not. And we shouldn't be, because of our tenure, not because of anything else, not our political stripes. We have our opinions. But at the end of the day, we owe it to the people that have summoned us here to be diligent with taxpayers' dollars. So, colleagues, I reluctantly will pass this bill because, like the rest of you, we're doing it with a gun to our head. That's what we've done here over the last 3 months. That's the truth. But once the dust settles, we are just as responsible for what will be, by the end of this year, a deficit that's going to be $250 billion or more, and we are also directly responsible now where, I think as we stand today, Canada surpassed that magic mark. We're at over $1 trillion in terms of a debt. So I don't have all the solutions, and I don't profess to have all the solutions, but I am raising some red flags about some of the issues that should concern each and every one of us today and going forward, because the hole that we have dug for ourselves right now is a hole that will take at least 3 decades to get ourselves out of. Thank you, colleagues.